What's up, family, and welcome back to the channel. Man, I hope you're having a wonderfully productive and progressive Monday. It is Monday, right? Yeah, it is. I hope you're having a very productive and progressive day. We had a wonderful time at our Sunday sessions yesterday. We launched a new conversation series entitled Drive, Take the Wheel, and man, it was just good stuff. But today, I'm going to be doing another book overview, book review, and this is a fascinating little book that I found entitled The Atheist Manifesto. And we're going to talk through it. I'm going to share some of the things, some of the things that I found in it, some of my thoughts on it, and you can determine if you want to check it out or not. So before we jump into this, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell, and consider joining, connecting, or supporting this community, channel, or content in any way that makes sense for you. And of course, last but not least, check out the merch. It's dope. And I mean, don't take my word for it. Go check out the merch. You could literally go now to windowshop.dldd.us and you'll see the merch. All right. So let's jump into this conversation. And by the way, yes, you may hear my fire alarm going off, or not going off. My house is not on fire, but apparently my battery is dying and it's time to change it. So you may hear it, or this might be good enough that you don't. We'll find out. All right. So today we're going to be talking about the Atheist Manifesto, the case against Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And this is by Michael Onfray. Now, Michael is a French author and philosopher, so I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right, but somebody will let me know. All right, now, published in 2005, this book presents a critical examination of the three major monotheistic religions: Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Onfray advocates for atheism and secularism, arguing that religious doctrines have historically been sources of oppression, violence, and intolerance. He's a contemporary French philosopher known for his contributions to hedonism, atheism, and secular humanism. His work often challenges established philosophical and religious norms, promoting a philosophy grounded in reason, empiricism, and individual freedom. And so we're going to start by going through a few of the main themes and the arguments that are presented in this work here, Atheist Manifesto. He systematically critiques the foundational text and doctrines of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, arguing first that monotheistic religions, by their exclusive claim to absolute truth, foster intolerance towards other belief systems. So his first argument, or his first critique here, is that monotheistic religions are inherently intolerant. He's not wrong there. As a matter of fact, in my notes, I do have on my to-do list, and this came out of the conversation that Jason and I had at this in this past week's Bible study with an ex-pastor, of showing that how anti-theist, that's good, how anti-theist monotheistic religions are, you know. And so, but that's a whole nother conversation. Let's kind of jump into a little bit more about what Mr. Onfray thinks, okay? Monotheistic religions often assert that they hold the exclusive truth about the divine, the universe, and the moral laws governing human behavior. This claim to absolute truth means that other belief systems are seen not just as different, but as fundamentally incorrect or misguided. Such exclusivity fosters intolerance toward alternative viewpoints because accepting the validity of other beliefs would contradict the core tenets of their own faith. Historically, this is manifested in various forms of social conflict, discrimination, and efforts to convert or suppress those with differing beliefs. The inherent intolerance arises from the conviction that there is only one true path endorsed by a singular deity, which creates an us versus them mentality. This mindset hinders dialogue and understanding, as adherents prioritize the preservation and dominance of their own belief system over coexistence with others. And again, he's not wrong. But he also highlights his violence and oppression. Historical and contemporary events demonstrate that these religions have been associated with violence, wars, and the suppression of dissent. That's not something we can afford to run from anymore. I think that one of the biggest issues, one of the biggest reasons that a certain political party has trouble getting the support it really needs is because it refuses to actually acknowledge some of the harms of some of the religious wars that are happening like right now, and the role that America has played in stoking that fire. That's another conversation. But another one that he hits is that faith is positioned in opposition to reason and empirical evidence, discouraging critical thinking and intellectual exploration. Which, in other words, this is an argument that that these religions, monotheistic religions themselves, are a suppression of reason. Monotheistic religions often place a strong emphasis on faith, believing in doctrines and divine revelations without requiring empirical evidence or logical proof. This prioritization of faith positions it in opposition to reason and inquiry. By encouraging acceptance of sacred text and teachings as absolute truths, these religions discourage questioning and critical examination of their core beliefs. Historically, this has led to instances where religious authorities suppressed scientific discoveries and philosophical ideas that contradicted religious doctrines. For example, the condemnation of Galileo for his support of heliocentrism illustrates how religious institutions oppose empirical evidence that challenges traditional beliefs. But we're seeing the same thing happen in our schools. I've been watching it happen in my schools for ever since I was in school. I watched it happen when the schools wanted to start doing some sex education. I saw it happen anytime the science programs needed to be expanded. The parents and the institutions were always there saying, but you keep evolution out now, which is really a sad place. Um, this suppression of reason hinders intellectual exploration, as adherents are encouraged to accept teachings unquestioningly, which limits the development of critical thinking skills and impedes the advancement of knowledge in various fields. And what I wanted to add here, because just reading this first sentence, I want to go back to it. Monotheistic religions often place a strong emphasis on faith, believing in doctrines and divine revelations without requiring empirical evidence or logical proof. Okay, so I want to take that a little step further and just show you where additional damage has been done, even outside of the church world, though it's still kind of in the parachurch world. And that's typically in the social media influencer community and the motivational speaker community, where the life coaches are. Because then, because people have become so accustomed to having this emphasis on faith versus logical proof, they will often accept social proof over logical proof. Okay. And this is something that gets used like in the most unintegral ways. I don't even know if that's the right word, but we're going to flow with it. But just in the most horrible ways, in these communities, particularly again the social influencer communities and the motivational speaker communities, where people know that you have this disconnection from logical proof, so they're using social proof to whet your appetite, get you salivating, and all of that stuff, and want what they have. And the sad thing is they don't even hide this anymore. They tell you that's what they're doing. It's social proof. It's social proof, and it's like, well, logical proof is really all I need. Okay. I just wanted to point that out. All right. So that was kind of the first section of that, which is basically his critique of monotheistic religions. But then he also talks about just the construction of God and religion as well, which is for me, like that's the strongest thing that I stand on from a sociological perspective. I understand how God came into the zeitgeist from a sociological perspective. I understand the evolution of religion, or I have an understanding. I'll put it that way. I have an understanding of the evolution of religion. Again, Emil Durkheim has a great work on this. Um, Please check it out. I'm trying to remember the name of it now. Nope, can't remember the name. You have to catch me at a later date. But anyway, so this has all obviously been a place where I've just really stuck my claim. Yep, stood my ground, all that stuff. Yep. This has been one of those places. I think some of the most popular videos on this channel have been where I've talked about this aspect. So let's see what Onfray says about it. He posits that gods are human inventions created to explain the unknown and to exert control over societies. That was it for me. And it was like, oh no, yeah, like we created God. God is the creator of nothing. Okay? Period. At least, that's my worldview. I know some of you still believe in God. So whatever you want to believe, hey, that's on you. But for me, it was just like, no, God has never created anything because God is not real, which is why I don't have the same hangups about things that other people have hangups, right? Because we're like, oh no, that's godly or that's from God, and I'm like, nothing's from God, dude. It's all from people. Like I don't know how you haven't went that far down the rabbit hole yet, but it's literally all from people, but maybe you're the ancient aliens type, and so it's from the Anunnaki or whoever the fuck else. And I'm not mad at you if you think that. Like, I really aren't. I'm only going to be upset with you if you try to force me to feel like I have to think that because I don't, you know. And I don't feel like you have to think what I think either. I share my thoughts because they are what I think. Why would I be sharing thoughts that I don't think? Anyway, okay. So he asserts that deities are human creations devised to make sense of the unknown and to wield influence over societies. In early human history, natural phenomena and existential questions such as the origins of life, death, and the universe were mysteries that lacked scientific explanations. To fill this gap in understanding, humans imagined gods and supernatural forces as explanations for these inexplicable events. By attributing occurrences like thunderstorms, droughts, or eclipses to the actions of divine beings, societies could impose a sense of order on chaos and alleviate the fear of the unknown. In that way, God, in a very real sense, has always been the God of the gaps. God has always existed in our gaps of misunderstanding, our gaps of not knowing. And every time we've filled in those gaps with actual experience and experimentation, there was no God to be found because God was simply the placeholder. You know, you don't get to assume something and then force it as true. And that's what God was. God was the assumption. God was the hypothesis. God was the uninformed hypothesis. And at one point in time, it was an understandable hypothesis to have. When you didn't fucking know any better, that was an understandable time to have that hypothesis. You now fucking know better. We've closed most of those gaps. I mean, are there still more gaps? But yeah, but those aren't even gaps we knew were there in the first that we knew were there in the first place. So now that we know that that first hypothesis was never an answer to any real question, it's safe to throw that shit out now and just be like, okay. If we get further down the road and it's like, oh shit, there was a God here all along, we're just gonna find something that was useful at one point and highly useless now. That's the only way that works. Man, that was good. Okay. So yeah, again, this is one of those places that I kind of put my stake in the ground. So I love stuff like this. Like, no, like we're not gonna play that game anymore. I'm not gonna play that game with you. If you want to play that game, that's fine. But from my perspective, I don't see God giving religion to humanity. I see humanity creating religion and then giving it a god, you know. And that is something that I am going to talk about in this much longer book that I'm writing called The Case for Religion. And contrary to the title, it's not literally just like defending religion. What it's actually doing is providing the very real strain of humanism that has always existed in religion. And it's going to remove a lot of the mythology from the religion and just explore it from a super sociological perspective. And that will really be my goal. And so that's why I keep mentioning Emil Durkheim, because I'm building on some of his work. And I had already written half of the book before I even came across his work. But I reached out to one of my former professors, who was the chair of the sociology department at Troy University. And I reached out to her and I said, "Hey, I want you to read some of this book and let me know what you think." And then she was like, "Oh, this is really good stuff." And she's not an atheist. She's a non-believer. I think she may be agnostic. And I know she's spiritual, which is funny, right? But she's actually literally one of my favorite professors in the world. And I have like three and two. I have three and two possibles. Let's play it like a spades hands. And so she said, okay, because just the stream of where you're thinking and the work you're trying to do, you need to check out Emil Durkheim. And I was like, ooh, let me go check this guy out. And of course, he's dead, but he's in a sense the father of sociology. And so I was like, man, maybe you mentioned him before and I didn't know, but I did find his work to be very fascinating. Um, because it does, in a very real sense of what Onfray is positing here, it kind of lays out the framework for how that actually happened, how we evolved, how this was actually a part of our social evolutionary process, which kind of brings us back. Okay, so let's talk about sociological evolution. If if once having this religious belief or this supernatural belief or this supernatural exception or perception of the world was sociologically acceptable based off of what we did not know yet. But because we have learned more, and with that learning more, we have been able to further um, further accelerate the existence of our sociological culture or our species in the earth and continue to advance and separate ourselves from those superstitions as a way of mimetic, if you will, sociological evolution, then what does that say for the large groups of us who are sociologically regressed? Those of us who are not participating in the sociological evolution. All right? And please, I am being clear here by saying sociological evolution. We're not talking about biology here, okay? And so I don't mean this to be offensive, but I do want us to think about this from the viewpoint of evolution and how we'd view it if we were looking at biological consequences or things of that nature. I share content on this channel because I consider superstitious religion to be a threat, an impediment to human progress, to human health, to human safety, to human sanity. You know, it's like I'm trying to think of something that was like a-okay. Oh yeah, 30 years ago, a-okay beating the fuck out of your kids was a-okay. Okay, we have sociologically evolved by far and large in certain places. So because of that, people are like, oh, we probably shouldn't beat little people, you know, or probably shouldn't beat people, period. Actually, like we don't have a reason to be violent. That's hard, right? It was a hard pill to swallow. But today, if you see somebody doing that, you're like, no, because we recognize, even though back then, we did not recognize it as harmful. We recognized it as this is what you do. But now we're like, holy shit, don't you do that. What the fuck is wrong with you? You know, that's how I see religion. And that was a great one to use because religion ended up being one of the reasons we thought it was okay to beat the fuck out of our kids. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Your children disrespect your parents, take them out and stone them motherfuckers. See what I'm saying here? All right, so furthermore, back to the book, he argues that the invention of gods served as a means for certain individuals or groups to exert control over others. By claiming to have knowledge of or communication with these deities, religious leaders could establish moral codes and societal norms that others were compelled to follow. The authority of these laws was reinforced by the belief that they were ordained by an all powerful being, making dissent not just a social transgression, but a spiritual one. This mechanism allowed for the consolidation of power and the maintenance of social hierarchies, as obedience to the deity often translated to obedience to those who represented or interpreted the deity's will on earth. Thus, according to Onfray, gods are human inventions that have historically been utilized to explain the inexplicable and to control social structures. Yep. The only differentiating line here is I probably wouldn't say explain the inexplicable, because much of the things that religions claim to explain are not inexplicable. You know, so it's more so to explain the things that they don't understand. Explain the misunderstood. That's a good way of saying that. And then he also analyzes religious narratives as mythologies that have been mistaken for literal truths, influencing cultures and laws. And the funny thing about that is that's literally what we understand about every other religion. You know, from a monotheistic perspective, a monotheist, for the most part, understands that every other religion is mythology that those people have mistaken, those current adherents have mistaken for literal truth. They understand that. They're like, no, we know that ancient religions are mythology. And anybody who practices those religions is confused. Pot calling the kettle black. You know, one of these things is just like the other. You know, keep that same energy. Ichabod did a podcast about that a few months ago. And that was the thing. Keep that same energy, the same energy that you can look at other religions at and say, nope, I know that's wrong. I know that's bad, or I know that's not accurate. And that's the thing, like the moment we put it back where it's supposed to be, there is no bad attached to it. Like Zeus was horrible as fuck, but we don't look at Greek mythology and say, oh, that's bad, because it has nothing to do with our present life. Nobody's trying to live by this shit. You know what I'm saying? This is what makes the Bible bad, is that there are people who mistake this mythology for literal truth. Gots to be more careful. All right. Another key theme is religion and morality. The book argues that ethical behaviors does not require a religious foundation. Secular humanism provides a basis for morality rooted in reason and empathy, and I 100% agree with that. I honestly believe that religion is a distraction from morality, that religion has never been a good source of morality, and that religion's only claim to morality, especially Christian religion, everything that it claims as its basis for morality, such as the Ten Commandments, are repeats from other religions and cultures. So it's not something that uniquely flows from it as a religious voice of authority. You see what I'm saying? All right, that's why I can't take these people seriously, you know. And then everything else is as amoral and immoral as it can really get. So yeah, which is obviously an argument that I make on this channel. Onfray critiques religious moral codes as often outdated, arbitrary, and harmful, imposing restrictive norms that inhibit human flourishing. He critiques religious moral codes by asserting that they often impose restrictive norms that inhibit human flourishing. I feel like I just said that. He argues that many of these moral directives were formulated in ancient times and reflect the cultural, social, and historical context of these eras. As a modern, as a result, they do not align with contemporary ethical understandings or the needs of modern society. For instance, certain religious prescriptions dictate strict rules about personal behavior, relationships, or societal roles that limit individual freedom and expression. Onfray believes that these codes are arbitrary because they are based on purported divine commandments rather than reasoned debate or empirical evidence. This reliance on faith based morality discourages critical thinking and prevents the evolution of ethical principles in response to new knowledge or changing social conditions. By enforcing rigid norms, religious moral codes suppress personal development, creativity, and the pursuit of happiness, thereby hindering both individual and collective progress towards a more open and compassionate society. And again, I can't help but to be inclined to agree. I realize that many times religion is often a very common excuse for people to do immoral things, for people to ignore um, the realities of other humans. All right, so he also talks about the impact on society and culture, which this is also another hot button issue for me. He discusses how religions have historically controlled education and information, thereby limiting access to knowledge that contradicts religious teachings. I've talked about how very many of our public education institutions, including our colleges and universities, are, for the most part, like parachurches, you know? He argues that religious institutions often establish dominance over educational systems to propagate their doctrines and maintain societal influence. For instance, during the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church played a central role in European education, dictating curricula that aligned with its theological perspectives while suppressing works that challenged its authority. And if you don't realize that that's going on in Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida as we speak, I don't know what you've been doing. Scientific advancements or philosophical ideas that conflicted with religious dogma were frequently censored or labeled heretical. By controlling the flow of information and discouraging critical inquiry, religions were able to preserve their doctrinal purity and prevent the spread of dissenting views. Onfray suggests that this monopolization of knowledge impedes intellectual process and stifles the development of independent thought, as access to alternative perspectives was restricted in favor of reinforcing established beliefs. That's a lot to deal with, right? Let's take it a step further. Onfray also explores how religious doctrines often impose strict controls on sexuality, leading to repression and feelings of guilt among followers. He argues that monotheistic religions typically prescribe detailed rules governing sexual behavior, which include prohibitions against premarital sex, strict definitions of acceptable relationships, and taboos surrounding topics like contraception and homosexuality. These prescriptions are presented as divine commandments, leaving little room for personal autonomy or the expression of individual desires. Onfray suggests that such stringent regulations suppress natural human instincts and create psychological conflicts as individuals struggle to reconcile their innate feelings with the demands of their faith. This internal struggle results in shame, guilt, or anxiety related to sexual thoughts and behaviors. By enforcing rigid norms, religious doctrine inhibit open dialogue about sexuality, hinder healthy development, and prevent people from fully understanding and embracing their own identities. Onfray's critique highlights how these restrictions not only affect individual well-being, but also perpetuate cycles of silence and misunderstanding within societies. He also highlights the patriarchal structures within monotheistic religions and how they have perpetuated gender inequality. So far, so good, right? He also spends a good deal of the book focusing on advocacy for atheism and secularism. He actually coined the term atheology. I like that. Atheology, not theology. Atheology. To represent a systematic study systematic study and promotion of atheism as a counter to traditional theology. He contends that while theology is devoted to the study and advocacy of the divine and religious doctrines, there should be an equivalent discipline dedicated to the critical examination and deconstruction of these beliefs. I'm not mad at you, bruh. I think that's some of the work that I do on this channel. Onfray's concept of atheology involves analyzing religious texts, doctrines, and institutions from a secular and rational perspective, aiming to expose contradictions, promote secular ethics, and encourage intellectual freedom by encourage intellectual freedom. So, by establishing atheology as a legitimate field of study, he advocates for atheism to move beyond personal disbelief and become an organized framework that challenges the influence of religion on society. This approach seeks to empower individuals to question religious authority and embrace reason and empirical evidence and foster a culture that values critical thinking over dogmatic adherence. So far, you're seeing some very real reasons why I have a high field of resonation with this book. This is definitely along my field of thinking and along much of the work that I've committed myself to. He supports the separation of religion and state, promoting secularism as a means to ensure freedom of thought and belief. And then he emphasizes the importance of science, critical thinking, and empirical evidence as foundations for understanding the world around us. Just some key arguments and examples is that he uses the Crusades and the Inquisitions, referencing historical events like these, illustrates the violent enforcement of religious dogma. Again, which as a global species, we're not out of that park yet. You know, we're still in that battle. And then, of course, he discusses ongoing conflicts fueled by religious differences, suggesting that monotheism contributes to social divisions. He also challenges classical arguments for the existence of God, such as the ontological and cosmological arguments, using philosophical reasoning. He also raises the issue of the existence of evil and suffering as contradictory to the notion of an all-powerful, benevolent deity. He suggests that religion exploits human fears of death and the unknown, offering consolation in exchange for obedience. Which I will take it a step further. I don't think the fear of death is very natural. I think religion created, or yeah, I think superstitious religion created the fear of death in order to sell heaven. You know what I'm saying? Um, I don't know. And like I don't have any empirical evidence on this, right? But I've had enough conversations to where I feel like I may have a framework to make this argument that I don't think we're actually as afraid of death as we think we are. I think, most people are not afraid of death. They're afraid of going to hell. That's different, you know? Um, when you move the fear of hell, there really isn't a fear of death, which means then religion doesn't exploit the fear of death. It creates it. It gives you a reason to be afraid of dying. Whoa, that got dark. But those are my thoughts. They're not grounded yet, but they're definitely my thoughts. And then he also analyzes how religious institutions maintain control over followers through doctrines of sin, punishment, and redemption. And again, that's that punishment thing that people are really afraid of, not death, because there's no punishment after death, if you believe like I believe. Death is the final punishment. You're gone. You're out of here. Ching. And it might not even be a punishment. You're just gone, you know? Depends on how you go, right? All right. As far as reception and criticism, this book is praised for its passionate and articulate defense of atheism, which I join in that choir. It's commended for its thorough critique of monotheistic religions and encouragement of secular thought. There are some criticisms, though, as with anything. Critics argue that Unfray sometimes overgeneralizes, not accounting for the diversity within religions. I find that argument to be just simply flat. Like, that's an argument that anybody makes about anything when you're talking about large groups of people. Well, you're overgeneralizing. Well, if there are enough people within that generalized category that fits the mold, it's still a problem. Just because you can find one or two minor fractured groups that don't behave that way doesn't mean that we should not talk about the 80% that do. Get the fuck out of here, you know? Some perceive his tone as confrontational, potentially alienating religious leaders who might otherwise engage with his arguments. So this criticism is, because he's mad at us, we don't want to read it. Well, fuck you, fuck off. Like, no. And I hate when people do that, because it's they do, like, well, your stuff, Christians who would listen don't want to listen. I don't make my shit for them. I don't make my shit for people who won't listen if I talk the way that I want to talk. No, fuck you. Fuck him. He gonna eat his cornbread. Sorry, whole flash. But no, that stuff like that, it doesn't really bother me. And I think the accusation of just like, oh, well, this might potentially alienate religious readers. That's like writing a book about vaccines and then someone saying, oh, well, this may potentially alienate anti-vaxxers. Stop that shit. You know what I'm saying? It's not on, the impetus is not on me to cater to the lowest common denominator. You know what I'm saying? And that's something that I've been fiercely averse to since I was deconstructing as a pastor, because that's something that as pastors, that I constantly had to do. And I'm like, no, stop this shit. I remember long after I had stopped being a pastor, somebody had sent me a message and they were just like, I want to understand what you're saying so bad, but I just don't. And I was just like, well, that's just your fucking problem. Like, I'm sorry. Like, no, I don't carry that burden. Like the old me would be like, oh God, how can I say this in a way that everybody would understand it? I don't have that burden. There are educators out there. I'm not one of them. I'm a communicator, not an educator. Oh, that's good. That's good. That's good. And mainly because I don't have the patience to educate people. Learned that the hard way. Like, I don't have the patience to do it. And it's a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's a bad thing. I've learned so much in my life, and I've had to be responsible for my own learning process, that I can sometimes be condescending to people who can't do that, not realizing that, me being able to do that is a part of my scarring. You know what I'm saying? And so this is why, like, educating, I'm probably not the most patient with, because I'm just gonna be like, well, why you don't understand it? Which I'm not really being fair on myself, because I know with our kids, that's one of the things that I've always taught them is focus on what you don't understand. Like, when you run into a problem, whether it's math, which is typically math, right? Math and science, you don't really run into problems with the other subjects, at least not for me. Yeah, because outside of a few things, they're very subjective, and so you can pretty much get through those things like history, and because history is typically a bunch of essays and what do you think about this and who was right and who was wrong, and you can fluff that any way you want to. But when it comes to math and stuff like that, math and science, you got to know the answer. And the principle that I started teaching the children was, okay, so when you run into these problems where you don't know the answer, that's where your focus needs to be. Your focus needs to be on what you don't know about this problem. What is it that I don't know? And I know that's a hard question to ask, but it's a brilliant one. task. So when you're looking at that problem, he's like, this times this divided by this equals this, and I can't get to the answer. What part of this equation is confusing the fuck out of me? Because once I know that, and once I'm comfortable enough admitting that, then I can actually just ask that question and figure out how to walk it through from there. So it seems to be very, very helpful. All right. And then historians have challenged certain interpretations of events, suggesting that factors beyond religion also played significant roles. And again, if the book was about other factors beyond religions, that would be a fair critique. But this book is about the impact that religion has, specifically monotheistic religion. So it's like I did a video a while back about monotheistic religion myself, and someone jumped on there trying to critique me with, you just overlooking the fact that polytheism. And I'm just like, dude, the video was about monotheism. Simmer your balls, bruh. Chill. Like, and just honestly, y'all got to stop doing shit like that. It's odd. This is why you ain't got no friends, man. Like, stop doing that shit. Stop it. But no, like, so these arguments, I've defeated them all. I've defeated them all on his behalf. And I don't even know if I like this dude, but I've still defeated these arguments because these arguments are mute. The only way this argument could have been valid is if the argument was they've challenged his interpretation of events, suggesting that religion did not play a significant role. That's the only way that argument could have any type of validity to it. The argument you're making here is that historians are saying that yes, while he is right, other things which his book is not about also impacted. And then I would even take that a step further, because those other things that people are tending to talk about are socioeconomic factors that are also influenced and controlled heavily by the way people religiously engage with their society. Don't try me. Okay. So, Atheist Manifesto serves as a bold and uncompromising critique of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Michael Onfray seeks to deconstruct the foundations of these religions, advocating for a society based on reason, science, and secular humanism. He encourages readers to question established beliefs, embrace critical thinking, and recognize the potential harms of religious dogma on individuals and societal levels. This book is recommended for readers interested in philosophical critiques of religion, individuals exploring atheism, secularism, and humanism, and those engaged in interfaith and secular dialogue seeking to understand different perspectives. Other notable works by the author are The Hedonist Manifesto, which advocates for a philosophy centered on pleasure and individual fulfillment. Cosmic Pessimism, which explores themes of existentialism and the human condition, and The Wisdom of Life, which discusses how to live a fulfilling life without reliance on religious or metaphysical beliefs. Yes, okay, I'm going to want to check that one out. And again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this man's name right. It could be Michelle. It could be Michael. It could be Onfray. It could be Onfra. I don't know. No disrespect. Hadn't heard of him until I pulled these notes together. But Atheist Manifesto is a thought-provoking work that challenges readers to reconsider the influence of monotheistic religions on society and individual lives. Whether one agrees with his conclusions or not, the book encourages critical examination of long-held beliefs and promotes dialogue on important philosophical and ethical questions. So if you're looking for something to read, this one might be one to check out. It definitely seems noteworthy, had some really strong points in there. I really seem to identify with it. I don't know much about the author himself, but I will probably be checking him out and checking out the cut of his jib, as people say. I don't know why they say it, but they do, which I don't even know if that's how they say it, but it's something like that. But anyway, thank you all for hanging out with me for these 45 minutes. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I said something that got some wheels turning around in there. As for me, I've now got to get back to work. Work is calling my name. But I hope you all have a wonderful day. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell. Consider supporting, connecting, or joining this channel, community, or content in any way that makes sense for you. And of course, check out the merch because it's dope as fuck. I mean, I've been telling y'all. And then also, of course, if you haven't checked out our books, you can go to Amazon and type my name in, DaranteLaMar, or my wife's name in, Darnea, and you'll find some books that we've written and see if any of them, strike your fancy. Yeah, I'm just pulling all of these out today. Where's this coming from? Like, I feel like I've been watching movies from the 1800s or something. All right. But anyway, thank y'all for hanging out with me. I hope y'all have a wonderful day. Until next time, stay progressive, keep rising. I think I did that backwards. And of course, stay beautiful. Only if you can, though. No pressure. I'll holla.